Hey, this is Sandy.
And Randy.
And we're here on AT Corner.
Being an athletic trainer comes with ups and downs, and we're here to showcase it all.
Join us as we share our world in sports medicine.
Welcome to another episode of AT Corner. I am excited for this one.
I think you say that every time.
Yeah, I do.
Well, you should be excited because this is actually your mentor this time.
Yes, so today we're interviewing Bill Ito. He's a certified athletic trainer that's currently working in the high school setting, but he also provides services for USA Track and Field, beach volleyball, and the AVP Tour, which is professional beach volleyball. Amongst his international experience, it includes the Rio Olympic Games, and he is shooting for the Tokyo Olympic Games as well. He received his undergrad at Azusa Pacific University and his master's at AT Still. So let's hear from Bill.
So what we like to do is we're pretty nerdy here. So we start with cryo breakers, and we had to
I
give it
saw
a nice
that.
nerdy
Okay,
name.
nice.
So
Very nice.
we'll just start with the first question.
Okay.
What made you become an athletic trainer?
I think for me, I can really attribute it to when I was in high school. I played football, and I was always hurt. I was always that athlete that I had bad ankles. I always sprained my ankles, and I was just that injury magnet. And I was fortunate enough to have at our school, they just hired a full-time certified athletic trainer. And her name was Cheryl Herlatcher. And she was just the greatest. You know, she really had great care, took care of me, kept me together, became like a mentor for me. And also too kind of got me interested in athletic training. And, you know, I love medicine. I love the medical field. I just knew I didn't want to be a doctor. And I didn't want to go all those years of school, but I was always interested in medicine, interested in like sports performance. And I always liked athletics. I always loved sports. So, I think that combination was kind of kick-started me on my kind of like my drive to be, you know, an athletic trainer. Never heard of it before. So that really got me interested. And she taught a class my junior year of high school. So I took her class and just fell in love with it and, you know, wanted to, you know, become an athletic trainer. My dad, it was funny at the time, he wanted me to become an electronic engineer. He worked for Xerox and he was like,
Oh, wow.
"You need to be an electronic engineer like me." And I'm like, I suck at math, you know, like I'm not, I'm kind of like disadvantaged here. So, but, you know, but I just taking that class, being an athlete, always being hurt, understand the whole process of, you know, injury management and rehab, and then getting back to playing and experiencing that firsthand. And then getting the chance to be able to learn the skills and the craft, and then, you know, cut my teeth, you know, in the high school and getting that interest. And then, and then the rest is history, you know? So, but yeah, I think I think it's with Cheryl, of who she was as an athletic trainer, her love for the profession. And like I said, just for me, just kind of falling into it, just like I said, being that, that injury magnet athlete, probably many of us have probably dealt with, you know, like that was me. I was that guy. So.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, it snowballed to where you are now.
Yeah. So I'm very, very fortunate. And years later, my dad was very happy. He's like, you know, you love what you're doing. You know, you're excelling at it. You know, you definitely have a passion. You've done well. You're making a career for yourself. He goes, "I'm happy." Even though you're not an electronic engineer, you know, you're not for some tech company. He was like, but, you know, just seeing years later, you know, and he's passed. So he's been gone for about 4 years, but even he would say to me, like, you know, he's just proud, you know, just of, you know, taking that path. So, you know, it all works out.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You got him on board.
Yep.
So getting to know you a little bit more, we came up with this question: what is your athletic training spirit animal? And the goal of this is to just kind of get, like, in your eyes, what tool of the trade, modality, rehab tool, tape, braces, whatever you can think of, that best represents you?
I saw this question and I was thinking, and I kind of chuckled. And I would say for those that know me within the last, you know, 6 to 8 years, I probably say my spirit animal will be the Chinese cup. So Chinese cupping. And you guys will laugh to this because, like, you know me. And so I think that would be my spirit animal, you know, in my AT spirit animal. So just for all the years that I've used it, I've had, you know, my interns that have worked with me I've had people ask me to present on it,
Mhm.
especially in the early days when cupping wasn't as popular. Just I've used it so much in, my clinical approach, that I was looking at that. I was like, that's the first thing that popped into my head. Like, it's going to be a cup. It could be a glass one. It could be acrylic. It could be a silicone cup. You name it, but probably a cup or a fascial decompression tool. So
I would say
I'd probably chalk it up to that.
it depends what mood you're in. Like if you want some flair, it's the glass with the
It's a
fire
glass.
and
Yeah. If you want the dinner and the floor show, you whip out the fire, as long as, you don't, turn on like the fire extinguishers on the ceiling. But, you know, day-to-day stuff, you can use the acrylic, or if you're traveling, then you could use like the silicone. But yeah, I think for what I've used a lot, and and just me and my personality, I guess, I think I would chalk it up to be a cup.
yeah, I love that.
So, you know that we like to pair evidence and experience, and we know that you have a ton of this. So, I think the best way to kick it off into our main questions is to starting off with a story about your travels.
All right. And I've had a lot of years traveling internationally. My first year ever on an international trip was 2006. So
Hmm.
I was trying to think through like what would be something like that was evidence with experience and how that kind of would pair with one another. And so um, I came up with this one. So in 2011, I was working with USA Track and Field for this trip, and I was fortunate to be selected as the head athletic trainer for our. It was for World Youth Outdoor Track and Field Championships, and we were in Lille, France. So we're in northern France, and so we get there and we're setting up shop, and we have like this little hotel that is in Roubaix, which is just outside of Lille. And the first night we get there, we set up and we're thinking like, okay, we got to get a lot of these athletes, especially if you're familiar with track and field. A lot of them are looking for ice packs. They're looking
Mhm.
for cold cryotherapy for recovery. And, we know nowadays, that's changing as far
Mhm.
as the use of ice, but back then, that was the big thing. So we use a lot for pain mitigation, and so we're thinking a lot of these trips, and I've had 5 years of experience before there. It's like first thing you do when you touch down, you look to see where your ice source is, and a lot of times if you don't have ice that's readily available, you're looking to places like the fish market because they
Oh.
always have to cool, like a local meat market. So
Mhm.
for us up there, because we're kind of near the Black Sea, we're looking at a fish market. So we called up and we're like, hey, do you guys have any ice? We're here for the World Track and Youth Track and Field Championships, and they were familiar with it, because it's a small region.
Mhm.
And this is a pretty big international meet, even though it's high school. It's like a U17 meet, but
Okay.
and the funny thing is, it's like yeah, we don't have that much ice. He goes, and we've already talked to the Australians. The Australians already kind of beat you to it. And I'm like, doggone it. And at the time, for those that have been around and did a lot of their research, you had the Australian Institute of Sport. And
Mhm.
so they were very involved with sports performance. And at that time, and I think around that time, they were publishing a lot of papers on using ice to help, with decreasing core temperature
Mhm.
to, and things like that, where it's like, ice was a big thing. So they didn't have any ice. Man, they beat us to it. So we don't have any sources there. We walked into town and looked for like a supermarket. We go into the supermarket. We're like, can you tell me where your ice is? And they looked at us like we had 10,000 heads. As one of my good friends would say, like I had lobsters growing out of my ears. And it's like, we don't, what are you talking about? Like they just didn't know. I'm like, you guys don't sell like crushed ice, like bags of crushed ice that we would go to any supermarket and,
Mhm.
and they're like, we sell that. It's like, oh, this is going to pose a problem. So in our head, we're thinking, setting up ice baths and, things like that if we had modalities and whatnot. And it's like, what do we do now? We don't have ice. So I remember that our sports psychologist was on board with us. And so her and I remember vividly, we're in the frozen section of this supermarket and we're debating, looking at what vegetables, because a lot of times the old school ways, like you get a bag of peas,
Yeah.
a bag of corn, and we're like, we have to go back to that. It's cold. And we were able to talk with the cook and the chef and the culinary staff at the hotel and ask them if we could use part of their freezer, for this. And we were lucky that our team manager, kind of worked with the staff over there. So, we're looking at, okay, is it like corn? Is it peas? Is it like slices of zucchini? So we're literally buying all of this frozen vegetables as much as we can find and lugging it back to the hotel. And we had to use that literally for a day or two for our ice. We said, hey guys, we can't do ice baths. I know a lot of you guys, that's what you're used to. We will try to work on, like, at the venue, at the competition site, we will try to see if we can get something done. So flash forward from not having ice and trying to use literally frozen vegetables to do, but back at the team hotel, we go and finally get the meet organizers to, hey, and it wasn't just the United States, even though a lot of the other countries at the time looked to the United States to kind of lead the charge for athlete care and things like that. So we went ahead and said, okay, we're going to get this done. So we went up and talked to the meet organizers and we asked them, do you guys have like ice baths, things like that? And they're like, no, we don't have anything of that sort. And where they put us, the team area was on a pro soccer field. So the stadium that we were competing at was a French pro soccer facility. And so they had a track, but then also too had a soccer pitch in the middle. So they finally like, give us a day. We'll figure it out. And so another day follows and it's like, hey guys, check this out. So we look and the meet organizers got some of the volunteers. And this one I'll never forget. They brought some trash cans, clean, of course. So they had like 6 45-gallon trash cans. But since where we were at, there was no hose, like you couldn't just any type of water source. They literally trucked in 2 pallets of Evian water, bottled water. And they had volunteers really unscrewing the cap and pouring them into these trash cans.
Oh,
and so,
goodness.
and then the ice, they didn't have crushed ice. So what they would do for ice in our region was they would have these big pools and they flash freeze the top of these pools. So the ice came in sheets. And so they just had these boxes. It looked like panes of glass and there were ice. So they would literally fill these, trash cans with Evian water, like literally bottles of water, and then break up these sheets of ice and put it in there and try to get it cold. And so, you have all these people coming by like, oh, is that to drink? Like, no, that's for the ice bath. And I'm like, this is the most bougie ice bath I have ever seen. And, all of our, USA guys like, hey, for those that want an ice bath, you better jump in now because you will never, ever get an Evian, ice bath, ever. So, yeah. So I think like with that kind of like looking at, sometimes you have those ideas of, okay, I need ice, I'm needing cryotherapy. But what we would take for advantage here in the United States or, country that uses ice, like in their drinks and things like that, we don't have it. They didn't have an ice machine at the hotel. Like most of their drinks are warm or room temperature. It's very unusual to have like ice in a drink. And so, yeah, that was a mind boggling, experience for me, just kind of watching that. Like, I know I have a video and picture of it somewhere and I just wish I can find it, but because no one would ever believe me. It's like,
Yeah.
no way. But yeah, they literally, that was like the only thing that they can think of to accommodate that. Because like I said, not only was it just the United States, but they had a whole host of other countries that like, we need to have some type of ice bath like for our athletes. So yeah. So I said, hey, worst comes to worst, plunk down some Fiji water, maybe some smart water, and I don't know, but yeah.
I was gonna say that's an ice bath with the water of the gods right there.
Yeah, I was like, just don't drink it. You get some people like, hey, I'm soaking, like, oh, give me a straw or whatever, but like, ugh, so yeah, but I think that would be my my interesting life hack type of experience with that one. But
Oh man.
Yeah, way to be innovative.
Yeah, for sure. So, speaking of like your international travels and stuff, what countries have you traveled to as an athletic trainer?
okay, so I've been to China several times. Been to Beijing several times, and then been to Canada several times, 2 3 times. Been to Mexico, like Central Mexico, and then been to Japan. Also Brazil. I was in Brazil for the Olympic Games in Rio, and also went to Rio for another trip. It was a World Half Marathon trip, and then France with the story that I just shared with you, and then been in Austria. We're in training camp in Austria for a little bit. Was in Russia, was in Moscow for World Championships, and then also in the Bahamas. So I've kind of been a little bit of everywhere. try to get. Oh, and then also Doha. I forgot to include the Middle East. So yeah, I was in Qatar. So yeah, so that was the last country that I was at earlier this year.
That's awesome. So when you're traveling to these different countries, what logistics do you have to prepare for, like as far as passports, visas, and what your scope of practice is on foreign soil?
So a lot of these, we're several months out. Sometimes it could be as much as 8 to 6 months prior, depending on where we're going and what the visa requirements are. So many times the national governing bodies that I've traveled with, they always say to double check your passport, make sure it is current. There's been a couple trips where it would be current at the time that I had it when they're organizing the team, but because of visa requirements for a particular country, they require that the passport be valid, like 5 years past that. So there have been times I've had to go in and do like an emergency passport renewal, because it's like, well, I have a couple months to go. I'm like, no, we need to have this extended period of time. So sometimes it was out of pocket. You have to do some of these hoops in order to go. I had one that I had problems acquiring a Russian visa because I was planning to go to Moscow with USA Track and Field, and this was my first senior men's and women's, like the Olympic level team. So like I didn't want to mess this up, but I was looking to see like, oh, Los Angeles, pretty big metropolitan area. We would have a Russian consulate. Wrong. The only Russian consulate that would be able to process the visas in which our team members required was in like New York, and then the other West Coast one was in San Francisco.
Oh, interesting.
So I literally had to do a drive turnaround. So I literally drove up, went and got my visa, and then hopped in the car and drove back to LA. So literally it was like commute 8 hours to get the visa, hop in the car, commute 8 hours back to come home, and to get into like at the deadline to be able to go on this trip. So sometimes there are challenges, and it depends on the country, of making sure you have your proper documents. It's important to have that current passport, also too, to make sure. And bigger national governing bodies, for example, like USA Track and Field, they have bigger staffs and they have people to kind of walk you through that. And they will email you and say, hey, we need to have this ready. We need to have this ready. Send out all the forms and things like that. They kind of help you. Some other organizations may not be as organized in that sense. So sometimes it's kind of important for the athletic trainer or the sports medicine provider to make sure that they are forthcoming and kind of proactive to search that out, whatever country they're going to. Making sure what is the visa requirements, what is the passport requirements. Sometimes I've had it's not mandatory, but it's a good option to have, but some individuals that will go through and do the global entry program. So that is like to fast track when you come through immigration, you go through a process and
Oh.
background screening and things like that, where you don't have to sit, like if you ever traveled internationally for recreation and you come back to the States and you get stuck in that huge line to get back into the country. Global
Mhm.
entry program, you pay, fill out the form, pay a fee. A lot of times it's a face-to-face interview at a large international airport
Mm-hmm.
for in our area, in the Los Angeles area, it'd be LA International,
Mm-hmm.
LAX. You can go there and then you could be in this global entry program. So you just have this documents on it's like your pre-screen. So then you just
Mhm.
go, it's a very short line. Welcome back. You're away for business or pleasure or whatever. It's like, oh, business. Okay, great. Everything checks out. So, and rather than staying in a line for 2 hours when you return, then you can have a fast track. And sometimes it is important if you have to transfer planes or transfer flights, because there have been times where I've taken an international flight, then I have to transfer to a domestic flight. And you have to go
Oh.
through, and sometimes our windows are very short,
Mm-hmm.
especially coming home. So, to have to get stuck in immigration to get through the checkpoint and then to get through customs, get your bag. And also it's like, oh, like I only have an hour to get from my international flight to catch my domestic leg so I can get home.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, that would be advantageous to somebody. So I know a lot of people have gone through, if they do a lot of traveling, if they're, maybe full time with an organization, it's like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
this is going to be worth it. So that's one of the things, they have that global entry system. So that's something that you can look up. I don't know if you could search it on Google,
Mm-hmm.
or like with the State Department or something like that. So things like that, just those are some of the main things. Scope and practice. A lot of times, if we are with a team, a national squad, an organization, our scope and practice is kind of, associated to the country that we're coming from or country of
Okay.
origin.
Mhm.
So, for us as athletic trainers, certified athletic trainers, we're, following our BOC scope and practice.
Yeah.
And that goes to like our chiropractors, if we have a licensed massage therapist, so it's just whatever our profession is, that's what we stick to, even when we're abroad.
For you, what you've seen, what has been the most challenging thing practicing in another country?
I think on some of these trips, it's the schedule. It's um a lot of people think like, oh, that's really cool. You get to go to another country and you got time off. It's like, no. It's a grind. You have to
Mm-hmm.
be able to be ready for the grind. You have to embrace it. I mean, there's some trips there, you're working 15 hours a day and you have to like it. Yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
like what you signed up for,
Yeah.
and you have to, I think the actual practicing part, like the treatment part,
Uh-huh.
is the easiest, to be honest.
That's what
It
you know.
really, it really is. Yeah. It's what we're familiar with. It's all the other stuff that gets challenging. Travel,
Mm-hmm.
time zone difference,
Ooh.
logistics, and just travel from the team hotel to the competition venue, making sure that you're accommodating all your athletes, making sure, and sometimes in some sports, you have to look at like interpersonal, like
Mm-hmm.
politics or conflicts. Sometimes that happens. There's little things that you have to navigate. You have to understand how to deal with different personalities. And then also, too, you just have to make sure, how do you make things easier for yourself when you're on site? So, like when wheels are on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
who do you need to, get to know? Who do you need to make friends with? Like for me, if I'm ahead, I'm always like, as soon as I land and we get to the hotel, I'm looking for head manager
Mm-hmm.
of the hotel, and especially like at night, the night manager, make friends with them.
Okay.
Look at the concierge. Concierge, if the hotel has got a concierge, make friends with them. A lot of times on trips, if I can, I would bring extra gear that I have: a hat,
Mm-hmm.
a shirt. Um, some national governing bodies, we have like pins, and they'll give us a handful of pins. So you want to think when you are abroad, and to to help you make things go easy, you got to make friends with the locals. And especially too, like I said, concierge manager, because you need towels, you need space to, to treat if you can't do it in your hotel room. And then also too, the head valet. That's another key one, the head valet, because your transportation. Let's say like if you had a problem, it's like, hey, and you make friends with the head valet. Like, what's an easy way? Like, do you have an Uber? Do you have a taxi? Do you have a friend? Do you have a driver? Like things like that. Super handy, and to have, and then so like that's just at the hotel, just to get some of those logistics. But then, making sure that if you are able to meet with like a meet organizer, be friends with them. A lot of times in bigger events, they will the meet or the local organizing committee will assign a country to have a liaison. So some places in the past, like China, when I was in Rio for World Half Marathon Championships, they would give us a liaison. English speaking, they're usually a college student, but they just want, they have some like, okay, they're assigned to Japan or they're assigned to Germany, and they just love that culture. So this is an opportunity for like a culture exchange. So,
Nice.
so like my first trip, I went to Beijing for World Junior Track and Field Championships, and we had two for our delegate because we were so big. And it was a guy and a girl. They're both college students. And the guy, his name was Wen Quan. And he had an interest in strength and conditioning. And he was studying at one of the Chinese universities. And he got to hang out with us, and it was great because anything we needed, we can ask him, hey, we need X, Y, and Z, or we have this, we need to talk to medical. Like, he was just a big help. So, and then also too, like, asked us his first time to Beijing. Said yes. Because we asked him, would you be able to like show us around? And he was totally, up for doing that. Showed us around like the Forbidden City and Tiananmen Square, and hung out with us for a day. And it's cool because talking with him, he actually came to the United States, got his master's. He's in strength and conditioning. He's been all throughout the country, and just learning from some of the top strength and conditioning specialists in the countries. Work with like college basketball back in China. Like it's just really cool, like his, you never know who you meet, but like for him, like we gave him shirts, gear and that kind of stuff where, yeah, you helped us out. Like, thank you so much, because it's very important to have, those individuals when you hit the ground. I think that is very, very crucial, is making some allies while you're there, and take gear with you. Take, like I said, take pins, trinkets. If you have like a local pro team, NBA team, something like anything. Sometimes like they just love as a token of appreciation, a gift. So sometimes that's cool. So sometimes that's really come in handy for me.
That's really cool. I was gonna say that's something you wouldn't even think about. It's like those are the more important connections than what most people would even consider when they travel.
Yeah, it's kind of the phrase that I had a coach that I'd work with. He's like, you got to find a way to grease the wheels, because if you can find a way to grease the wheels, it makes the machine to roll and function easy. And that's the last thing you want, is to have hiccups, once you're abroad, because you need to have everything go smooth for your team. If it's your medical team, you have to have things go smooth for your athletes, because you want to minimize all those distractions that could take away from performance during the competition.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Have you ever come across a language barrier?
All the time. I wish I was very, that's something I kind of regret, like, being very proficient in, multi languages. But for those that aren't, I mean, I totally butcher, Spanish. I try to do as best as I can when I'm in Mexico. China, a little bit of Chinese that I know. Usually it's like the hello, it's a thank you, just really basic stuff. Russian is, I try to figure out Russian. It was like, yeah, I'm lost. That's just rough. Portuguese, it was like, oh, I want to click into Spanish, but I know it's more like, it's very, it just, sometimes I do encounter a language barrier. I definitely try as best I can to use the local language. And if not, Google Translate is wonderful, and so there are times though, like you have to be careful of what you use, like on Google Translate. So I'll give you an example. I This was a couple years ago. So I was working with USA Beach Volleyball, and this travel experience was rough. It kind of ended up to be almost a 40-hour travel excursion. So I was supposed to fly from LA to Beijing, and that was like a 16.5-hour flight. But because there was a typhoon in the area, my flight was delayed 2 hours.
Ooh.
But because of that 2-hour delay, I missed my connection in Beijing to go to, it was like in the southern coast of China. And, it was like a 3-hour flight. And so, because I missed that, and that typhoon was pretty big. So I also had a chiropractor that was working with me for this trip, and he went the day before, and he encountered the same exact thing. So he was late 2 hours. He had to spend the night in the Beijing International Airport. So he's sending me the warning, like, hey, this typhoon's pretty big. It's hanging around. You're probably, and because we're taking the same flight. So some of these trips where you go across the Pacific, it's one plane. So it's literally like when one plane flies, that same plane flies back. There's a delay back, in the like origin. It's by the time that it arrives in LA, it's going to be late. So as he's there and the flight's coming back and I'm ready to take it the next day, he's telling me I have to spend the night in the airport. This is where I stayed. This is the bench that I was at. This is what you need to do. So he was giving me like a little bit of a cheat sheet, which I'm totally grateful for. So, but and sure enough, 2-hour delay, fly out there, land, I miss my plane, and it's late. By the time I get there, it's like 11:30, 11:45 at night, and everything is closed. So I'm trying to figure out and try to piece my way through, like, well, what do I do to figure out how to get to my connecting flight to get, I need to get on to another flight. And so, you kind of work your way and try to be polite as best you can. Cause the more that you yell, I found that the more that you yell, the more that the anger that you get, the least help that you're going to find. So you just got to be very patient, and so on and so forth. But I use Google Translate. So that, and then I kind of typed out what I needed to ask and then played it, and they listen. And sometimes it's clear and sometimes they use the right words and whatnot, but they kind of get the gist because they also know like we're coming from a plane that was delayed. So that was kind of nice. But then I finally get onto my connecting flight. 3-hour flight. And then from when I landed, I still had to take another, it was like an hour and a half. It was like a 90-minute taxi ride. So the thing is, I'm by myself. So I have my kit for like a week stay. I have my table. I have my suitcase, and it's just me. So I'm going through this little like regional airport, and I find this guy, and I'm like, I type in the address of the hotel I need to go to. I just kind of point to him, and he's like, okay, I'll take you. Kind of like, he didn't say it, but he kind of just like waved to me, like threw stuff in his car. And it was the most awkward hour and a half like ride through the Chinese countryside. He didn't know a lick of English. I didn't know any Chinese. And so I started after about the first half hour, I'm like, oh, I need to break the ice because this is way too uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I just typed something on Google Translate, and I hit speak, and he was like, and so and he had his version. China's got their version of Google and so he did his version of like Google Translate. So we somehow, through our apps, were able to communicate, and like come to find out, like he had a son, he's a mechanical engineer, like, so we made it work, and so I think like if you don't know the language, at least try to get some of the basic phrases. And then, you can always rely on an app. Just make sure, you have a good data plan, international data plan, and things like that.
Yeah, that's true.
Some of the other ones that I like, if I'm in a big international meet and you're in kind of like the team area, is whenever you go by someone from another country, try to say hello to them or good morning when you get there, in their dialect. I always love doing that because then people freak out, So if I know in Japanese, or for me, I'm half Thai. So I remember one meet, and I had the Thai contingent. They had a bunch of sprinters, and so I come walking by and I say good morning to them, I say hello, and and they're looking at me like, how does this US guy, how does he know Thai? We got to talking. I told him, my mom is Thai, and it was just really kind of you love to throw people off, you say, and you just try to do that every day. You try to say hello, in every country's language, and it's just great because, because a lot of people have this preconceived notion of what Americans are like, and I think it's, to break some of that stereotype or that stigma. So that's one for me, if it's a language barrier, I love to do that just to kind of, it just puts a smile on my face because everybody's so, serious, and it's competition, and everybody's competing for their own, national pride. But sometimes I just love to do that. I think that's a fun little thing to do.
That's cool. So speaking of your med bag, how difficult is it to travel with med bags?
It is a challenge. I am gonna say that the longer the trip, the more supplies you're gonna have to take, and that gets real challenging, especially with weight requirements and oversized requirements. So a lot of times, we do have to pay those charges. Some organizations are very good because they'll pay you money up front to help front those costs. I think that's another thing for anybody that's ever interested in working on an international trip with an organization. That organization should help cover those costs of getting your table, getting supplies over, things like that. So we've had some, when I first started working, some of the organizations just put on a credit card, keep all your receipts. We'll have money for you. And some of them, it was like that. I would have to make sure I had a very hefty credit line, because there's one trip I remember leaving LAX, and granted, I had my US gear on. I really talked to the lady at the counter. It's this is a medical bag. I'm working with this organization. I'm headed out to represent Team USA on the medical staff. This is for our athletes. We're working on a world championship here. And they look at it like, oh, it's for medical. And a lot of times when I say it's for medical, then they'll give kind of a discount. But there was one trip, my bag and the table, because the bag was overweight. They look at you when you put it on. You put it on the scale, and it's 150 pounds, and they're like, "Yeah, sir, this is way overweight." In my head, I'm like, "Yeah, no kidding, Sherlock." I'm like, "Of course I know it's overweight." I've got everything that I've got a full blown mini athletic training room supply store in this bag. I'm like, so. But there's some tricks. I had some friends of mine who have done things to offset weight, tape, for example. I have a couple friends of mine, and I picked this from them, and it's absolutely brilliant. So you can take your rolls of tape and put them together in old school logs, maybe 8 to 10 deep, and roll it in saran wrap. And then what you do is you pack your table. So you pack your table, if you got room as it folds, you can pack the inside of your treatment table with tape.
That's
brilliant. You could do it in there. I've had some trips where he brought gifts back, Russian vodka, things like that, just to name a few. but I mean, that's something that my friends have done. I'm like, that's brilliant. So that could take some of that weight out of your kit, and you could diffuse that into, offset it, because your table, it's oversized. Most of the time it's going to be, outside of regulation parameters. So even if you got that to max weight, you're still going to pay oversized anyway. So why not try to offset and see if you can not have to pay double, which this one trip that I did, like I had to pay, it was like $450.
Okay.
Because my kit was overweight, and then my table was oversized. But yeah, so that one trip, it was 450 leaving from LAX, and then our final destination was Moscow. But then after our meet was over and we're flying home, and I had to check all that stuff in. Oh, and I also had an extra bag because I had the modality. I had to bring an ultrasound, so I had 4 bags total. And so we brought a Solaris unit, so I had that. And then yeah, it was fancy. We were really busy, but it killed me. So like we're in Moscow, ready to leave, and they looked at all the stuff. It's like, oh, it's too many people. I'm like, we're part of the World Championships. Like we're leaving. This is what we brought. And he goes, okay, you have to pay for it. Like it hit me, like give me the cost. It was like $800. So like literally it was double than what I had leaving, so I was like, I'm holding this receipt, and so, eventually like I got reimbursed.
Yeah.
But, some organizations are really good about being quick with it. Some organizations will have like their team managers because they know that people are bringing over all this gear because that's what we need. And it's better to do it that way because they know that individual has it, rather than shipping it. Because like you ship it, next thing you know, like it's gone. We don't know where it is. It's like, then it's really gone, so at least some people look at it's advantageous to just pay the overage charge when you fly rather than actually shipping it. So sometimes things get lost in customs. I mean, I've been in that situation before. That's the same trip. The organization shipped over a bunch of electrolyte replacement drinks. I'm not going to name the company, but we had everything that was shipped over, and it was like a couple pallets worth, and it got stuck at customs. Wow. We never ever got it. And it was like, all right, okay, you got some, individuals in this country, like you got like 2 pounds of free product, So there's times where like things get lost when it's shipped. So, but yeah, you just got to make sure you have enough to cover, or ask for the organization to cover. A lot of times you go on to the airline and they will give the prices of like what is overweight, how much it is, how much oversized would be, or if you have to bring an extra bag. So things like that. But you have to get creative. That's why also too, a lot of people are trying to look for some of those portable treatment tables. Several companies out there, Light Life Tables, Astralight or Astra Tables is coming back, and they make a smaller, lightweight table that fits within the travel guidelines, so you don't have to pay overage charges. So and sometimes they're like in a case that's on a backpack. And, sometimes those tables can fit in an overhead compartment, not often, but sometimes they can. But so those kind of things, you have to just look at the airline for those charges and what's the weight requirement. And then you just have to get real creative with packing. I think those are challenges, that we face with med bags, is just making sure like you have all your stuff. How do you disperse it? How do you allocate it? And also too, like, do you get your med bag back? Like I had one, this was domestic. It wasn't even international. Like, I saw my bag on the cart on the runway because I'm in the terminal, and we had a thunderstorm that came through. No cover on the cart. So I'm looking at my bag and it's not waterproof. And we have this like summer storm, and it's just soaking everything. So I get to my location, I have to pull all my stuff out, like lay it out in my hotel room, get the blow dryer. I'm like blow drying everything. So that's something to also keep in mind, is knowing where you're going, the time of year, what kind of luggage that you use. And through my years, I've just kind of evolved in using different bags. Now I have one it's kind of like almost like a hard case, but it's sealed. It's nice. It's got TSA locks, so you can lock it with a key, and then TSA has a particular PIN key that they can utilize that and open up to inspect your bag and then close it so that nobody else can mess with it. So that's kind of nice. So there's some cases out there that have that type of hardware to it. So yeah, you just have to kind of like do your research and but those are nice. They roll, they're waterproof, they're lightweight. The one that I have can actually fit, and I can use it as a carry-on. So I just make sure like my liquids and stuff are in my check-in underneath, or I can take liquids, and this is another one because there's like the 2-ounce rule. A lot of times if you have like massage cream or what have you, you can do your 2 ounces in a clear container and then in a clear Ziploc bag, but you can have as many as you want. I've done where like I filled up as much as I needed, but in a clear plastic bag and they could see it, but each vial is not bigger than 2 ounces. And I've gotten that through security. So,
nice.
And a lot of times you could just ask them like, okay, this is hand sanitizer, this is massage lotion, this is ultrasound gel, sometimes I'll write it on there, but as long as it's clear, as long as it's not greater than 2 ounces and it's in a clear plastic bag, you can run it through and they're just, as long as they can see it, sometimes like the lotion and stuff, they'll make you take it out and they'll smell it or, if it's this, put it on your skin, that I've had some weird stories about that too, like what TSA would have you do and, home and abroad. It's like, okay, so some TSA guys or some security guys have gotten like free treatments going through, like looking at your gear because you got to demonstrate on them.
Yeah.
Like, I had one, it was BioFreeze. And I had one, this was stateside. And TSA guy's like, what's this stuff? And it's like, it's BioFreeze. Well, what's BioFreeze? That sounds like, something dangerous. And it's like, it's a icy hot. It's a pain, like pain reliever. It's like, well, show me, and I'm like, and then his friend's like, yeah, tell him that your shoulder hurts. I'm like, all right, come over here. So I literally took it out. And I rubbed it on. I'm in the middle of security. I'm like, well, I got time. So, but I'm showing like I'm putting it on this guy, and the guy's like, oh yeah, I get it. Okay, cool. And if you're cool with them, and just like let me go through.
Nice.
Things like that. I mean, you have one, like the massage sticks. Those the rollers. I had one that really looked like a weapon. It had gear, like plastic gears on it, and pretty aggressive looking massage stick. And I was in Frankfurt, Germany, and I had to go from one arrival, and I had to get a connecting flight, and I was late. It was like a 20-minute period, and I'm like hustling, and this guy's like, "You can't take this on. I got to confiscate." I'm like, "No way, I need that." I go, He goes, "What is it?" He goes, "It's a massage stick." And like, he didn't quite understand, and I like come here, and I waved him over and like turn around, and I started rolling his back and his shoulders, making him feel good. It's like it's a massage, and he's like, "Oh, that feels good, okay." And it's like, "Okay, you can go ahead and go." So like, thank you. Like, grabbed it, and I'm like hustling through the airport to make it to like my connecting flight. So yeah, sometimes you gotta like just make sure like show it. If you give like a TSA guy a little bit of love, sometimes that goes a long way.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Have you ever had anything confiscated?
Almost. I got it back, but I had a kit, and this is I literally this was I was going to Beijing. This is the second time around, so this was for senior men's and women's World Outdoor Track and Field Championships, and I just flown in from Japan. Japan was our training campsite. And I was on my flight from Japan to Beijing, landed about in the afternoon. And when I landed, our head athletic trainer was like, "Hey, Bill, do you mind? I know you just landed. Do you mind covering? We just got a practice session. Coach doing a practice session at the track." I'm like, "Yeah, no problem." And that's one of the things too. Like, you got to be willing to do whatever you need to do, because I was tired. It would be nice to go to the hotel, freshen up. It's like literally, like I arrived at the hotel, dropped my stuff at medical. I didn't even get a chance to check in. They just need somebody right away. And I was one of the first athletic trainers to come over from the training campsite. So like, yeah, no problem. Grabbed my stuff, got on the shuttle, got over to the track. And so they had a security checkpoint. And so I'm running my kit through, and I got scissors.
Yeah.
I've got all kinds of metal hardware. I've got my soft tissue mobilization tools. So literally it goes to the metal detector, and it blows up like it's the 4th of July, and they got all these security forces, and they just stop, and they pull my bag out, and they open it, And they're like, we need to take this because they had a thing on there, like in their country, you
Uh-huh.
can't bring in scissors, and they consider those as weapons.
Oh.
So I literally had like, you know, my nice stainless steel scissors.
Oh
I
yeah.
had my kinesia tape scissors. I had all kinds of scissors, you name it. I mean, it was ridiculous, and they wanted to take all of it. And I'm like, I need those. Like, those are things that I use for medical purposes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they were going to take them like for good. I'm like, so I literally was arguing with them. And at this point, I didn't use Google Translate. I was just like, you're gonna figure out my English in some way, shape, or form. But we kind of got to a point, and I was just had to be forceful with it. Like, hey, this is my stuff as a medical provider for this meet. You have to allow these, and like literally, I was like the first practitioner from the country there, because it was like the first practice session. And so throughout the course of the meet, the practice venue like changed their policies as it went. But like, I was the first guinea pig, and so they literally took all my scissors and put them in a box, and I couldn't
Wow.
enter the track with them. I asked them for one pair of paramedic shoes, so like I
Oh.
can work with that because it wasn't all metal. It had some
Yeah.
plastic on it and whatever. So, and they're like, we'll let you take it. I'm like, okay, great.
Thanks.
So, and the whole point, like, I'm arguing, like, all of our athletes are like, Bill, are you okay? Bill, are you okay? Bill, are you okay? I'm like, don't worry, get in there. We'll take care of you. Just get some training in, and I'll get set up. But yeah, so like, and then luckily when I left, I made sure, like, hey, I need all my stuff back. And so luckily I was able to get all my tools. And then the next day when we got there, then they kind of eased up the restrictions, because now you had other countries that were, coming into the same problem.
Mhm.
So and then too, like when I got back to the hotel, I told our team, like our head team managers, like, you need to talk to the LOC about, medical entry for practice venues and so on and
Uh-huh.
so forth, because this is the problem. He goes, yeah, no problem. So we're luckily, like, with that team, we had someone who played that role that was a liaison for like our Team USA to the local organizing committee.
Nice.
And, so that was nice to have that support. But yeah, I was like, yeah, this isn't cool. Like, I need these tools. And like, no, you can't come in, and we need to confiscate these. I'm like, no, you're not. So, I've been fortunate though, like on international trips, like through the airlines, I haven't had things taken, at least to my
Nice.
knowledge. Maybe it was like tape or something, but for the
Yeah.
most part, like tools that I use, yeah, I haven't had anything confiscated. So, which is nice.
That's so
Nice.
good.
But
So you've mentioned that, you've been kind of the head of medical for a few of these trips. How is it working or traveling with controlled substances, like coordinating with the physicians on trying to get those done, or traveling international?
yeah, I mean, that's important in the fact, like, it depends on what country you're going to.
Okay.
Because we just have to make sure that we are under the jurisdiction of a particular country, and
Mhm.
what they view is what is allowable to bring into their country, and especially at the amounts that we're bringing in for a team. Also, say, like, for some of the bigger organizations that I've been a part of, when our team physician travels, they have the designated med bag. So
Mhm.
that's all the prescription strength and all that stuff. So they are usually in charge of that as far as inventory. It travels with them. So the athletic training staff, we won't handle any of those controlled substances and
Nice.
prescription things. So usually we'll kind of chalk that up to the team doc. Now, in trips where I didn't have a team physician, then obviously I'm leaving those at home.
Yeah.
And then I just take over the counters. I just got to do my research and like what over the counter medications that are allowable to bring into that country. And most of the times it's your ibuprofen, your
Mhm.
acetaminophen's okay, and just got to admit the amount that I bring in. I do know, like, in Japan, this is kind of a specific story. When we were going over for training camp before World Championships in Beijing, um, they do not allow like narcotic or opioid pain relievers into their country. It is prohibited, like punishable by imprisonment. So with those, we actually had to have a waiver presented, and I think it was several months before we arrived for training camp that we had to state this is what we're bringing over, and it was at the mercy of the Japanese government as far as say yay or nay. And so yeah, so like those, like in their country, like it's opioids, I think is prohibited, and if you had possession of those, even if you're possessing it, which may have been legal in the United States, and you had it on you, and you're coming into Japan, you had it on you, like it could be punishable by imprisonment.
Wow.
So it was really strict. It was really stringent. So we were going through. I'm like, wow, okay. So our team physician, he had to go through like, okay, this is what we're going to use, this is what we're going to bring, and so fortunate in those kind of cases that role of controlled substances, prescription strength medications, that's going to come from that team physician role. But like I said, like you've heard me before, it's very important to kind of research each country, what they will allow for someone to bring into the country, or particular substances that are banned, and strict punishable offenses, things like that. So yeah.
Well, you've done a great job of giving us a lot of applicable knowledge, which is what we strive for on this podcast. So for this, you can kind of wrap it up in one answer if you'd like. What advice would you give to those that want to work with the USOC, and then overall, what do you want listeners to apply the next time they travel? I mean, you've given a lot of great tips already, but if you could just wrap that all in one, that'd be perfect.
Yeah, I think for those that are interested in getting involved in the Olympic movement and becoming a sports med provider and volunteer, and is first reaching out to the USO, and now it's a USOPC, so it's great.
Oh, yes, that's
right. United States Olympic Committee and Paralympic Committee, and going to, I think it's teamusa.org.
Okay.
Go to their website and you can search Sports Medicine Volunteer Program. And they have an application. And there's some requirements of, if you're a certified athletic trainer, you could be a chiropractor, PT. And I know the first step is once you apply and they review your application, security screen, things like that, is doing a 14-day volunteer rotation at an Olympic training center or an elite training center. So towards us, you have Colorado Springs, which is the headquarters. And then Chula Vista, which is not an official Olympic training center anymore, but we do, or the USOPC still has the medical facility on site, and we still have Olympians that are training there. So ironically, next week I'm headed down there to do a volunteer rotation. So nice. It's a great staff down in Chula Vista. It's multidisciplinary. These individuals are top-notch, multiple world championships with their various national governing bodies. These guys are the staff that goes to the Olympic Games as part of the overall Team USA medical staff, outside of a particular national governing body. But that would be the first step. Nice. And so to reach out to them, making sure like you have your experience. I think it's 3 to 5 years. You may have to look at that. When I applied, this was back in 2004. I'll date myself. It was a while ago. You had to have 5 years as a certified athletic trainer underneath your belt. So that was one of the requirements. And then once you do your 2-week and you're involved with USOPC, then look for a particular national governing body. When I say NGB or organizational committee, it'll be like USA Water Polo, USA Swimming, USA Track and Field, USA Beach Volleyball. They will have needs, and some those providers come from the USOPC. Some they hire in-house. So like my USA Track and Field, I was very fortunate to have my good friend and colleague Andy Pollan, who had worked for years with USA Track and Field. And when we were working together, I asked him like, "Hey, how'd you get involved?" And he was like, "Well, this is the person to contact." And Jack Ransone, who's out in Texas, he was at Texas State at the time, and he was kind of like the head athletic trainer. And we called him the assigner for USA Track and Field, and reached out to him. And there was an application process. And a lot of times, those national governing bodies will require a letter of recommendation from someone that's already involved in that sport. Could be a coach, could be an athlete, could be a medical provider. So it's good to network. It's good to also make sure like you volunteer for particular events. If it's an Olympic type of sport, get involved. And most of these things are volunteer. There are some positions that are coming around now where it's full time or it's reimbursed and things like that. But a lot of these are volunteer, and that's what people need to realize when they sign up for it. Is you do it for the love. And I know that some people are like, well, it's my time is worth something. It's like I look at that and I agree. I totally agree. But and it's a choice. It's not for everybody. And I know for me, like I want to serve. Just to serve these athletes, to be a part of the Olympic movement, and getting to an Olympic Games someday, which I was very fortunate to do, and the last Olympics to be part of that staff and to go, and that was 10 plus hard work and years to work up through the ranks and have the USA Track and Field management and the head athletic trainers to have faith in my ability to bring me on board and to be appointed for that. Like it's an honor. It's a lot of work, and so it's one of those things where it's gratifying, but it is a grind, and it's a grind, and it's one of those things where you really appreciate once you get to that point, because if that's a goal that you set, and really for me, like it's something that I wanted and aspired to way back when I was an early in school and a young athletic trainer. Like I wanted to go to the Olympics, so I wanted to do track and field. I was able to do that, and so working with the USOC is working through the national governing body, getting a chance to go to a world championships on staff. And then eventually, you work your way to Olympic Games. So I've had some of our athletes that were in Rio that got up on top of the podium. I was fortunate to be on staff when they were at their first international meet as a high schooler, and to see that progression is awesome. To be a part of that is awesome. And so, what they should apply, I think you got to love the grind because it is a grind, and you got to have a great attitude to check your ego at the door, because, everyone's there for, it should be athlete centered, because really at the end of the day, that's who you're trying to support is those athletes. And that multidisciplinary and collaboration is key, and it just makes you a better practitioner. It makes you a better clinician when you're surrounded by great knowledge, great experience, great insight, great perspective. Just you come away as a better clinician, a better practitioner. And I think the last thing, and I really took this to heart with every trip that I went on, is to understand that you are the face of our country. Wherever you go, people see what's on the media. People will see what's on social media, and people form their opinions of what Americans are on the international stage. Understand that you represent this country wherever you go abroad, and that you're a visitor. You're visiting their country, and it's very important where you may feel inconvenienced by something that's like, well, this is how we don't do it. We do it this at home, and this is better. It's like, but you're not at home. You're in somebody else's country. You're in somebody else's culture that you need to be a great representation of the United States. And so every time that I've always tried to make sure that I looked at the people that I interacted with as like, that person, this is going to be their first interaction with an American, and I want it to be a good one. Or even maybe if they've worked with someone and it's a bad, negative experience with an American, I want to be hopefully someone that, that changes their mind, that, we're here for sport. And that's the beauty of it, is whatever affiliation, cultural difference, political affiliation, the way that the world is today, when you come to these international meets, we're here as a common ground for sport. And as medical providers for sports medicine, sports performance, and things like that, that we do have a commonality. We do have differences, but we also have commonalities, and to be able to be open to understand, we'll have We'll disagree with certain things. We'll
Mm-hmm.
disagree with philosophies, but we're here together for sport. We're here together in this common ground. We're here to transcend a lot of those things, even though we're not competing, but
Yeah.
we're supporting those that compete. I think that is a really big responsibility for those that work abroad and that are a part of these, national teams, whether it's with the national governing bodies like an official Team USA, or it could be
Mm-hmm.
maybe with like a private team that's coming from, or even to like a college. A lot of colleges are going overseas and they're
Yeah.
doing training camps over there. Like we would hope that people would understand as they traveled abroad, like, let's help change the image. If
Mm-hmm.
it's a bad image, of our country, be the one to make our image better. For those that haven't gone on an international trip and you have a chance to, like, you're there for work, you want to do a good job and represent the
Yeah.
athletic training profession well. But when you get a chance, like, be open and soak up the culture and,
Yeah.
and keep an open perspective and see how do people do it outside of our borders,
Mm-hmm.
and take that knowledge and take that experience, synthesize it and help broaden your perspective to be not only a better clinician, better athletic trainer, but maybe even a better person. So hopefully, they can take that to heart, when they do travel abroad
Yeah.
and, work as an athletic trainer and help support these athletes as they compete around the world.
Nice. I love that, Bill. That was perfect. Well, sweet. Thank you, Bill. We appreciate
Yeah,
it.
yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
Man, that was a super helpful talk.
Oh yeah, I've never traveled internationally, but I think that with the couple of gems that he gave us there, I feel a little bit more confident.
Yeah, there were a lot of stuff I didn't even consider as far as checking State Department, and even though he's with an organization that has people to do that for them, it's always nice to get a better game plan yourself, because it is kind of on you when you're traveling like that.
If you guys have any extra tidbits that you want to add, head over to our Facebook listeners group, AT Corner Community. It's in the show notes and description below. We want to hear from you guys. Have you traveled internationally? What have you learned on your trips?
So since this episode was an education, our next episode is going to be story time.
Yep, so the next episode we're going to be talking about weather. The good, the bad, and everything that especially outdoor athletic trainers have to deal with.
Ooh, the struggle for the outdoor group. But it sometimes it does beat just being inside all day.
If you guys have any stories to share, make sure you email us at atcorners@gmail.com. Some of our upcoming episodes include working with other healthcare professionals, crazy mechanisms of injury, concussions, and hydration and cryotherapy stories. But we'll take anything you have. We'll store them and make sure we fit them in the appropriate episode. You want to wrap it up?
Yeah, thanks for helping us showcase athletic training behind the tape. Bye.